All right, hey, welcome back. Steve T here from SOFtact Solutions and Tech Talk Team Room. Got with us again today, following up here in D.C. with Michael Campbell, who is the president and general manager for Privoro Government Solutions. We also have, if you guys remember, a year ago, it was about a year ago, wasn't it?
Yep.
Roy Steffen, right? Formerly with Quantinium, partnered up with SOFtact Solutions to help us with facilitating the government's needs with regards to the quantum space. Happy to announce that Roy is now the CTO for SOFtact Solutions. So welcome aboard, Roy. I mean, a lot of things that we're going to do, a lot of ideas that you have. We'll talk a little bit about those here shortly. But really excited to have you on board. And I can already see, the trajectory going up, right? The opportunities exploding. And really want to have those conversations so those folks out there know what's coming their way.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm great. Yeah, awesome. New to the scene on the podcast, someone that we've known for years, served together in a couple of places within the soft community. Retired military, retired 05, right? 04. So Eddie Garcia is the founder of Government Affairs and
Business strategies,
right? And so, what's the acronym? What does that spell?
It's GAPS. So GAPS. So anybody who's familiar with DC, all we do is talk. And so Garcia, Government Affairs and Business Strategies. I'm assigned to help people structure a conversation so they can talk and their message is clear to the right people in the right offices.
Well, thanks. And again, appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us and have a conversation. For those folks looking, hopefully we got some new folks coming to the podcast. Certainly appreciate the comments and the feedback we received from a year ago. Please hit up Mike, hit up Roy directly. We'll make certain that Eddie's info and his contact info is on there. If you have a question or you need some support, I'd ask that you hit those guys up or hit Joy Barr, our marketing manager who puts all this stuff together for us. She'll have that information out there. Hit us up directly, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So, Michael.
Yeah.
Again, welcome back. It's been a year. I know Privoro, as we talked about trajectories earlier, right, on an upward bound trajectory, and there's a lot of late breaking news coming from the secure mobility side. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys got going on and what you're hoping to solve?
It would be an absolute pleasure. Well, actually, what I want to do first is back up and just make sure we're reiterating the challenge that we solve or the problem that we're addressing with some fresh perspective. So we may take it for granted because we all work in this space, but maybe people that are listening don't understand. But the challenge or problem that we address is security on mobile devices in a unique and hardened way, or unique way that uses hardware. So why does that matter? So, and I have a phone in my hand. Everyone, I think, maybe even has a phone laying in front of them, but it'll definitely have one in their pocket probably. But everyone in the world carries a commercial mobile device, uses a commercial mobile device. They are world-class, amazing devices today. They do everything, including carrying artificial intelligence literally in your pocket that listens and can answer questions and give you advice and information. Well, how does it do all of that? And why are a lot of these capabilities and features free to us as users of these devices? It's because they are designed to listen to you. They are designed to watch the things that you do and track that. The other thing they do is they track your location. They constantly want information of where you are. So it correlates all of that information and it creates this thing called like an advertising ID for each of us, and then that is sold so that companies can market their products to you. So when you use these devices and you are using features on those devices that you think are free, they're not free. You are giving up your personal privacy to allow that service to then be given to you. And the money-making aspect of it is, again, the resale of what you as an individual are doing, where you are, what you like or don't like, et cetera. It's freaking unbelievable what it does. It's a little concerning as well. It is especially concerning, getting to the challenge that we solve, is if you work in a line of business that is sensitive. Like, so if you're a government employee at whatever role, or if you're you work in the private sector in some sort of sensitive role, or if you're just a person who has a lot of privacy concerns, then you might want something like what we provide. So then your question, giving that context, your question is, okay, what's changed? So we started out providing hardware that wrapped around the device to mitigate the risk, camera, microphone. We expanded that with hardware that wrapped around the device, camera, microphone, and radios, so eliminate the radio tracking ability of the mobile device. Those type of solutions are actually now in use by the government. They actually meet the requirements for mobile devices to go in and out of classified spaces. But the challenge is that the hardware has to correlate to the mobile device, and as everyone knows, mobile devices are constantly being upgraded. Everyone wants the newest, best, or whatever. And that lag between the hardware case security product and the form factor that people want to carry creates friction. And security and friction are always a balancing act, and you're trying to find the middle so that people can be secure but also not inconvenienced. So the newest thing that we've done is listen to this feedback from the community, where can you do something and eliminate the need for the hardware? So working with Samsung, not with any of the other phone manufacturers because they don't care, specifically one or two of them, but Samsung has been willing to work on this, so we have developed a software option. And timeliness of this podcast is great because we just announced that capability last week at RSA, a big security event, in partnership with Samsung. Samsung actually had executives fly in from Korea for the announcement. There are, besides Privoro, which is a sign, it's a good thing and a bad thing, but besides Privoro, there are now other companies adopting this capability to put into their portfolio of capability and solutions, et cetera. So how does it work? It is as simple as you just download an app on your phone, and using some magic behind the scenes, the solution can actually now, via software, not hardware, kill power to the camera, the microphone, and the radios on the phone itself, as well as now the USB-C port.
This is being rolled out when?
It was launched last week,
Mm-hmm.
and it will be available to consumers, to companies, to the government in May.
In May, and this is predominantly this is government focus only right now. It's not.
That's a great point. So it was designed with the government in mind, but the feedback from the larger community is that individual consumers are very interested in this. Small enterprise businesses with international privacy, intellectual property concerns are interested in this, as well as I would say regulated business like legal, finance, healthcare, etc. They all have concerns around these amazing mobile devices recording everything that we do. So we built it to the most demanding customer, the very special parts of the government's military, and some very sensitive parts of the government who do very classified work. And now we're hoping to expand beyond that.
I love this. I love that. I always say technology should work for me. I shouldn't be working for technology. And I was always one of the guys who would pop the battery out of the back of my phone when I wasn't using it, right? And you don't have those abilities anymore.
Yep.
It's all integrated unit. You can't just take the battery out. Even when it's off, it's not really off. And so that's why I love what you're doing with your technology, because I finally feel like I'm back in control of the device and what I'm exposing to other people and to third parties.
Yeah, thanks. We didn't, when Privoro was founded, it was actually founded for personal privacy reasons. And they got a phone call all the way back in 2016 or something from a government entity that said, hey, you're the only people that we can find that are addressing mobile device security in this very specialized way. So the company kind of shifted and went pure government, kind of completely government focused, and that's where we have been focused. But we are making plans now to figure out a way to again, make this available to, pretty much anyone.
So a couple of things, right? Technological advancements, right? Again, mobility or secure mobility has been a challenge for the government for quite some time, and in some aspects, right, some folks may not see it as an operational requirement. I think we had that discussion the last time, right?
Yeah.
As identifying secure mobility as a true C5 asset.
Yeah, let's talk through that.
And so what and again, as Roy had mentioned, right? The technology should work for you.
Right.
I would offer that if you go past decades in conflicts and campaigns that we had there, in my opinion, right, I believe that those conflicts and campaigns, based on the things that the government and folks on the ground were seeing, it forced the industry, right, to innovate quicker, to respond quicker, and to develop faster. With ongoing campaigns and conflicts that we have now, do you see the threat on the mobility side, right?
Yeah.
The
All right.
unsecured mobility things that are happening in today's conflicts, right? How much more important is it now to have the ability to manage the phone, as you had just mentioned?
Yeah, so I'd like to dig into this, and actually it's be good from a policy perspective with your expertise. So backing up again, there are approximately tracked over 1 million issued phones in government today. In the Defense Department, again, tracked phones issued, somewhere north of 200,000 tracked phones, right? These are phones issued to typically senior leaders, or et cetera. So these are the unclassified phones. There really are no rules around the unclassified phones. So but security professionals do realize the risks that we've been talking about. So if you go to a place like a military headquarters, a base, even the Pentagon right over here, you will see either a rule where you can't bring the device in at all because of the security risk, or you'll see these fancy, completely unregulated wall lockers or just baskets of phones. That has been the security approach of our leadership as they've looked at the risks associated with mobile devices. So understanding that, which is maybe okay, or at least has been deemed okay, for a military that sits back here in the continental United States and isn't doing anything. Recently, there has been an uptick of operations outside the United States, and military personnel and civilians associated with the military have all of a sudden been more active around the world. It was released in the news recently that using this exact technology, that military personnel were targeted with kinetic strike capability because of the phones that they were carrying. It was able, because this stuff, the data on these devices is something that is open source information. A government can be collecting it all the time. So when a phone from Fayetteville, North Carolina, or a phone from Tampa, Florida, or a phone from Virginia Beach, or a phone from Northern Virginia or Maryland appears in some country where the military might not necessarily be safely operating, the users of those devices is now at risk. How are they tracked? They are tracked by the phone being associated to them as an individual, that advertising data that we were just talking about, and the phone numbers themselves back to a piece of hardware that's linked to the original source of the device, right? This is not rocket science. This was the domain of nation states only back in maybe the 80s and 90s, but this is advanced beyond that now. So anyway, this is a long way of going full circle. So in terms of requirements, the U.S. government has requirements around mobile classified that are pretty freaking stringent, and they are expanding the demands of security on the mobile classified solutions as they pertain to commercial mobile devices and their ability to access classified. Today, from a policy perspective, there's a gap. Again, the only rule says you just basically can't carry them in and out of a classified work environment if they have a camera and microphone on them. That's it. And the resulting thing is a basket or a box, or they leave them in the car. The reality of today's world, the reality of humans, is that we want to take advantage of this amazing tool, right? I want to use this thing to make my mission more successful. They carry these devices forward with them into operations so they can chat, they can pass and relay information, they can take pictures, record things, etc. I mean, they're amazing tools. They're not just going to park that tool on the off chance that they might get tracked and targeted, right? So I think the team here, the team that we all have been a part of or support, needs to consider all of that, and that's the solution we've been working on.
That's good to hear. I again, right? I think probably, in either another topic of discussion, maybe we get to it today. I know we covered it, last year when we sat together and talked about the capabilities of Privoro and the things that you guys were doing, and went in depth with what it means with regards to the general user doesn't necessarily understand what it means to shut the radio off.
No, they do.
Right. And that's probably, as you kind of mentioned, right. And hopefully folks get in touch and reach out, the potential or the possibility for Privoro to kind of go outside the government space and provide that level of security out in public. It would be worth, right, knowing and understanding the capabilities in its entirety. Right. And because, if you don't necessarily, you just know all these buzzwords.
Yeah.
And I push this button and I'm supposed to be good. If you don't necessarily understand why it's doing it, when it's doing it, then
I had
it
this
kinda defeats the
conversation
purpose.
recently, actually, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So Roy hit on it when he made that comment earlier. He says, I took the battery out. Roy, maybe take a moment and say, why'd you take the battery out?
Yeah, well, I didn't want to be tracked, right?
Yeah.
And my wife will make fun of me sometimes. Say, what do you care if they're tracking you?
Yep.
And I said, but they're taking that information and they're selling it to other people, and it's my information, and I should decide when that information gets exposed. And if I'm making trade-offs about my security or my privacy, they should be my trade-offs to make, not somebody else's that's taking my data without my permission.
That's right. So today, can you take the battery out of a phone?
No, I'm stuck.
Yeah, so why
I can't
is
even
that?
really turn it off.
Why did they eliminate the ability to remove the battery from the mobile device?
They wanted to upset me. I think that's what it was.
Why do you think? What's your opinion? Maybe not a policy question, but why can't we remove the batteries from mobile devices today?
Yeah, because they want you to buy another phone when the battery runs dead, or like mine, it loses a charge after 4 hours, and
Yeah.
so I'm going to need to upgrade my phone. That's what I would assume.
That's actually a good point. Yeah,
Forced
definitely. There's
obsolescence, yeah.
forced
Yeah.
obsolescence is definitely
Yeah.
part of it. The other part is, and people may not realize this, so this is what Steve's commenting or questioning was, the phone never can be turned off. And I think this was important. I was sharing this with somebody recently. They're like, well, why don't you just tell people to turn their phones off? You can't turn the phone off. The phone never is completely off. It's, you guys have like Find My Phone, like you turn off the phone, it's still there.
No.
The phone's battery is constantly still doing something, right? Yeah. And that's partially because they don't want you to disappear. The advertising aspect of this is I want that thing constantly tracked. So you put it in airplane mode, sure, there is some reduction in its transmit, but the radio, the power to the radio is still on. The power to the camera mic potentially still on. You don't know if it's on or off. You don't know if it's on or off. Your technique previously was take the battery out, right? Kill the power. So yeah, that the only way to do this properly is the way we've done it, which is because they won't allow you to have control. We've worked now with Samsung to take back that control. We kill the power to the radios, the GPS chip. We kill the power to the camera, the microphones. We actually kill power to the USB port. You can't access it anymore. So then you have physical control, even though it's via a piece of software. The back end is manipulating hardware.
So what kind of reception have you received, or are you having conversations with the department leaders, not like individual unit leaders, for a broad stroke policy changes in this area, if any?
Yeah, we've actually gone down that path for years now. So it's such a challenge to go through all the rules that said, hey, you can't carry a mobile device, an unclassed mobile device, and out of a government classified work environment was a years-long effort to consolidate the rules and then create it into one common framework. The National Nuclear Security Administration under the Department of Energy, for example, was a champion of figuring out a way to use commercial mobile devices and their very classified work environments. And they organized the policies around that. They have been the leaders. Now, I would say the supporting cast has been the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. They have all leaned forward. Now, why is that? They have extremely hard to recruit workforces. When you try to recruit a young person out of a university and the first thing you tell them is, well, you're going to get a clearance and then you can never use that mobile device ever again. That thing that's been attached to your hand your entire life, you can't use it anymore while you're at work. Most people get very frustrated with that, and they want to move on. Now, challenge. What's the challenge? Well, the vast majority of the government leadership, workforce leadership, they're all older. This is an unfortunate downstream effect of that. Older workforce, not necessarily tied to these mobile devices in their daily activities. And then I think, this is an opinion, almost all senior government leaders come with support staff. And the higher up you are, the more support staff you get, and they just don't realize how challenging it is to try and do work without a mobile device, because they're surrounded by a support team. If you're somewhere in that middle staff, though, you have a challenge.
I think you're hitting on something there too, that it's not just that they enjoy having the device, right? If you're a younger person and you're used to having it your whole life, they depend on it and they use it, and it becomes a tool that makes them more efficient, better at their job, better at accomplishing things and optimizing their tasks. So, taking that away from them is denying the whole organization some of that functionality and some of those capabilities.
Yeah, the challenge, though, is right. If it continues to go down the road of an administrative requirement, right? If the language isn't changed with regards to what is required as an output, right? If it isn't established as an operational asset and or requirement down the road, then there'll never be any funding, right? It'll be pockets of resistance, pockets of acceptance. And then universally, right, you won't be able to get the solution out to permeate as an enterprise platform, right? You'll have pockets of security, pockets of protection in certain areas, and others will remain vulnerable. Well, all those entities eventually have to converge, right? They have to talk at some point in time or another. And so, I would offer again, right, the struggle we saw last time, struggles we've seen in recent months when we start talking about your solution, we start talking about the potentials and the possibilities to support from tactical to strategic. You can't get the right folks, right? The right folks to understand what the true vulnerabilities are that, yes, you're being collected on, right? Yeah. Regardless of the company, entity, or adversary, everyone, even in the household, right? There is a level of collection, right, that is being absorbed and stored. Which again, right, we partnered up in the past. Roy at the time was in Quantinium. And so we also know that there are capabilities inherent to your solution that leverage AI, right, for good. Roy, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we in SOFtact Solutions are going to do, mitigating all those risks in some cases, right, and trying to help our partners like Privoro, right, together as a team get to that next level and establish a true requirement, right, where security is most vulnerable. Because, again, it's ubiquitous. Everybody has a cell phone, regardless of where they're at and where they're using it. What can we do to help? What can we do to help Privoro, and what are we doing?
Well, I tell you, one of the biggest challenges right now that people are facing is the quantum threat, right? They're facing quantum challenges. They're facing artificial intelligence challenges. But on the quantum side, it's really difficult for people to get a handle on the complexities of quantum physics, quantum entanglement, qubits versus bits. And you can really get lost in the technology. You can get lost in the science of this emerging quantum computers and quantum security landscape. So what we try to do is help people understand that the ways to protect yourself are using classic IT security, classic IT approaches with a small spin in order to help with quantum. But the basic actions of upgrading a piece of software or upgrading your network infrastructure, these are standard upgrades that we've all done hundreds, if not thousands of times in our careers, right? In this case, we're upgrading some of the cryptography algorithms. In this case, we're enhancing some of the routers and the switches that are in our market. But you don't necessarily need to understand quantum physics in order to apply some of the very innovative solutions that the market has come up with in order to help protect your classical systems, your laptops, your servers, your data centers, help protect those from quantum threat and quantum attacks. So we're looking at different technologies. We're working with customers to bring them upgrades to their infrastructure. So a lot of people want to start with an inventory or an assessment capability where they look at all of the applications that are happening around their organization. They develop a cryptographic bill of materials, sometimes called a CBOM. And all that is a long list, a long inventory list of all of the different applications and what level of security they have turned on in each one. And once you have that, then you can look at what your priorities are and upgrade those applications to be leveraging the right algorithms and the right software to be quantum secure. Again, you're not doing anything with quantum computers at this point. You're just upgrading your classical systems so they have an extra layer of protection that protects them against attacks from a quantum computer. So that's sort of the first approach that most people are taking. You look at GSA, you look at NIST, they all recommend doing that inventory process first. But we're running out of time, right? We used to think this was going to happen in 2035. Now, the latest figures that are coming out as recently as just a couple days ago, Google released a new study, and they're moving the date up to 2028. So we're here sitting in 2026. 2028 is not that far away. So in addition to doing this long inventory and prioritization process, which is going to take you a while, it may take you years in order to finish and complete that, and it may be past the point of Q day where these attacks could start happening to sensitive environments.
So check this out, right? Q day. Now we need to pull out
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Everybody knows what 0 day is.
I was going to
Zero
explain.
day.
Let's
there's
talk Q day.
It's closer to Y2K,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, okay.
Like,
So timelines. We hit on that quite a bit last time we were together.
yeah.
And we spoke to the test phase, the in-doc phase, the acquisition phase. How long does it take a government entity, right, to go through its paces and finally, go through the acquisition process and then realize, right, the solution.
Yeah.
And in most cases, right, it's years, not months.
Yeah.
And so, as we spoke last time, right, it was the same thing everybody else said, whether it was secure mobility this time, right, quantum challenges and security issues there is 5 years from now. 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Again, now we've gotten in just a year, right? It's 2028, which probably means sooner, right? But today the government isn't prepared, and even if they were starting their planning today, they're not going to get there before a Q day is right. So again, it's one of those instances whether it and this is where I think is going to take the government at large to identify certain things as absolute requirements, right?
Yeah.
Secure mobility being one of those under the C5 umbrella is going to end up being a result of a catastrophic event, right? A catastrophic event that forces, right, these agencies to establish a no-kidding requirement that this solution is needed everywhere we have folks on the ground, and in CONUS. So with that in mind, what Q day? What everybody knows 0 day. That was a Q
Yeah,
day.
explain it.
Yeah, so when you look at 0 day would be if an attack happens today, then having to be able to respond within minutes or hours, right, to a 0 day attack, and that's just traditional patch management, traditional security vulnerability type of language, right? When you're talking about Q day, you're talking about that moment in time when quantum computers are strong enough to launch these types of quantum attacks. Sometimes you may hear them referred to as Shor's algorithm or Grover's algorithm, other things that are coming to light. But when we talk about Q day, everyone has this question mark over when exactly are quantum computers going to be strong enough to launch those attacks. When we were facing the Y2K challenge, there was a very specific date that Y2K was going to hit. We all knew it, right? It didn't change. It got closer as time went on because of time marching forward. But the date itself stayed at, midnight, January 1st of the year 2000, right? That was the date that everybody was concerned with. And that date didn't move as it got closer and closer. Yeah, I know, but it didn't end because people took a lot of they took it seriously, and they took a lot of proactive steps. So when you're talking about Q day, you're talking about the the challenges of when that quantum computer is going to be strong enough. So you've got a number of different moving factors here. So Q day keeps moving up on us, right? People used to think it would be 2035, 2040. They weren't sure exactly when it would come. But what we're seeing is the quantum computer manufacturers are moving faster than we thought originally. So that started moving the time frame up. And then the mathematicians and the physicists started looking at the algorithm, particularly Shor's algorithm, that's going to break some of our classical cryptography like RSA and elliptical curve and Diffie-Hellman keys. And they started optimizing the mathematics. So now it takes less and less qubits, less powerful machines to be able to reach that Q day. So Q day keeps jumping forward and closer in time to us as time keeps moving forward, and everyone's getting squeezed because everybody's behind. People haven't started their assessments the way they were supposed to do it. So now what we're helping customers through and what we're recommending for people is they start doing things in parallel. It's not just your assessment and your inventory. You can also start locking down your network and upgrading your infrastructure network to be quantum safe and to use post-quantum cryptography right now. There are solutions you can start implementing now. So even as you're buying yourself time to get your inventory in place and to upgrade all your applications, you can at least start locking down your infrastructure. You can also start doing vendor assessments and vendor roadmaps, where you're forcing anybody that you bring in, any refresh, any product refreshes, software or hardware, any new acquisitions, you should be forcing them to have a very near-term roadmap for supporting post-quantum cryptography and protecting you from that quantum security. Because we can't do it ourselves. The customers can't do it themselves. It has to be a group effort. It has to be the vendors that are manufacturing these products, the software vendors, the hardware vendors. They need to be stepping up and making sure their products and their capabilities are quantum secure. The people that are acquiring them need to require that as an explicit requirement in order to make sure that they have the drive and the sort of financial focus to be able to implement those requirements in the near term. Because again, 2028, I was joking yesterday, I can see that from my house. You know, this is getting closer every day.
Yeah, and if you were going to describe, so Q day, like just to get back to like how my mother would understand it, maybe anyway, it's when you can break commercial encryption. So like we're texting and anyone can read it, or the computers can read it and see everything. Or we're downloading websites and anybody can see what that is because they're encrypted, but it's encrypted with encryption that now will just be broken. And then basically a transaction like a government exchange of information using commercial encryption on our unclassed systems, all of that will then now be open to the public because it can be broken.
And anything that you're doing with your bank, any of the banks, VPNs
all that
you set up, any of your authentication technologies, your CAC cards, all of these different technologies are all leveraging RSA. They're all leveraging elliptical curve. And those are the algorithms that are going to be broken first that we know of. And we've known it since 1994. So we've had over 30 years to prepare for it. And still, it's sneaking up on us, and people are waiting to the last minute.
Yeah, and along those lines, so Steve was talking about requirements. So on mobile security, we know that at least on the classified side, they're addressing or looking at enhanced security, but on the unclassed side, it's wild west still. There's really no acknowledgement of it as an operational requirement. So thus, no funding or very limited funding, or it's wild west funding. On quantum, what are you seeing? Is it a requirement to address this problem, in your opinion? Is people beginning to put effort into organizing teams responsible or leaders responsible for mitigating the challenge?
I mean, it is challenging, right? It's a big thing to overhaul. We're seeing a lot of people sort of stick their head in the sand. There is requirements where they're supposed to by now have done assessments and inventories and prioritization of their software. And a lot of these requirements we're preparing for a Q day in 2035. Or maybe 2030. But now that it's moving forward, it's moving faster than the requirements.
But there's a distinct difference here, right, with regards to what would be considered, recognition of a requirement or recognition of a threat. Most of the entities that we are either trying to support, help out, or otherwise, they've identified that this is a threat. They may not agree on the timeline, and from our perspective, they are significantly late. But they have identified, and they are establishing funding and resources to do it. I think the challenge here a little bit different with regards to secure mobility or other technologies, not taken away from any of those, is the level of complexity.
Yeah.
The level of complexity when you start getting into physics, right, and you start getting into all this math, so complex that it's harder for them, even though it's a vulnerability. The threat has been identified, the money's been set, the directives are coming with regards to we need to prepare and we need to get to this. The technology alone is so complex that where do you start, right? How do you start? Who do you know in the industry is telling you, right? Which
Step one,
what you
step two, yeah.
what you need
Yeah.
to hear versus what you want to hear, and so solutions. How do you challenge someone coming to the door saying I've got the solution for you? If you can't figure it out, if you have no idea, right? How do you know what they're selling is viable? And so there's a lot of other, I would say, environmental challenges. I don't think this is going to be a funding challenge. I think this is going to be an academic education and quite frankly, a technical challenge. Because again, right, we've had this conversation before,
Yeah.
how many more of the upgrades with the classic compute infrastructure that everyone has been using for the last 3 and 4 decades, that's going to be obsolete eventually. And so how do you rebuild something that took 30 and 40 years to build? And how do you do that overnight? You just don't. So I think there are other environmentals that are going to challenge the proliferation of quantum solutions. But if you need a solution, right, and you want to team up, because we teamed up together to provide that level of security on the cloud management side, right, for Privoro, come talk to these guys. Roy has the solution for PQC, can solve that problem for you, and have certainly teamed up with Mike Campbell on that with their secure mobility solution as well.
I just
And
want
the
to
trick-
hold on, I just want to pull the thread on that last piece about like the larger environmentals, as you put it. The reason I think that the few quantum requirements or quantum cryptography requirements that have come out already, the only reason that they've had any impact is because they were set at the CIO level, and the CIO directed those few requirements. And so both of these issues are so large. All the secure mobile devices, or all the mobile devices, huge footprint, quantum securing all end devices, end user devices, applications, huge problem. We continue to play whack-a-mole with all the different offices to try to, ones that are early adopters that understand the problem. But that's, even if you get a champion in those lower offices, you're subjugated just to that office, and you say, okay, I got one customer of maybe 50 people, maybe it's 500 people, but it's not the department. It's not a million people. It's not actually solving the larger problem. So identifying the champions amongst the leadership within the administration in whatever department we're talking about defense right now, but also having a champion across the river into Congress to put forth not policy but legislation that directs the departments to start to move in the direction that they need to move. And I'm not the tech, so I don't know where to guide them, but that's how we start to solve the larger problem, and then using that success, hopefully at the lower level, as a pilot program to show the department leadership, like, hey, we're winning here, but it's regulated to this office, to this unit, to this location, and now we need to expand it. Being able to show that success to the upper level leadership to develop department-wide policy, coupled with legislative terminology in the NDAA that Congress passes to then direct the department to do the right thing. That's the larger. That's how we boil this ocean of mobile devices and quantum secure devices.
There's an aspect to that of innovation, right? That when you're under a lot of continuing resolutions, like the government's been under, it's hard for those proof of concept, those pilots, that innovation to happen down at the ground level. There needs to be funding. There needs to be a recognition that people need to try some of these technologies out. And we can't just wait for an enterprise-wide deployment. That'll take years, and it's going to fall flat on its face, quite frankly, if there haven't been some smaller incremental proofs of concept that have gone forward first and figured out some of those challenges, and some of the satellite uplink challenges, some of the deployed systems challenges, some of the mobile challenges that the commercial world hasn't necessarily implemented yet. But they're smart people that have good ideas, and there are technologies that could be used for that. But it needs to be tested. It needs to be ground truthed and make sure it's meeting all requirements and compliance. And these things, they take time. And you can't just come in with a lightning bolt and say, I would like an enterprise solution developed from scratch. It's gotta in some ways build up from the ground. But you're right, unless there's the funding and the policies and the ability to do that innovation coming from the top level down, then those proof of concepts just won't happen. And those problems won't get solved on the ground where they need to be.
And then bring in, another aspect of the challenges that quite frankly the industry as a whole, but the impacts to government based on the technological advancements that are happening so quickly. I don't believe that anybody was prepared to see how things have just sped along, especially on the AI front, right? And so as everyone is now trying to figure out how to tackle, right, the quantum security issues. How do we get the message to the right folks to make them understand that that's tied to your mobility? Everything today is tied to a cell phone, right? Some sort of end user device. I mean, they are no longer separate. And so that should be a C5 operational asset, and it should be looked at as a resource and a tool under that umbrella and funded it, similarly. But when you look at the things they're trying to figure out, and then you throw in the complexities of what is AI, right? I mean, if you are an AI optimist, everything is grand, everything is good, let's keep automating and moving forward. If you're that AI pessimist, and certainly a few of those, right? Because there are some dangers with the lack of regulation and oversight, and things are moving quickly, right?
Yeah.
And it's a transformative platform, right? It reaches everyone, it touches everyone. But so all of this happening at the same time, if you're a government entity, even established as a requirement, where do you start first? Right? Where do you start first? And oh, by the way, while you're at it, it's already here. Right? It's in everything we do. And so, Roy, are you an AI pessimist or are you an AI optimist?
I'm an AI realist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the third category.
I wasn't ready for that one,
I'm
but
gonna
okay.
thread the needle here.
Yeah.
Well, I see a lot of great opportunities with AI, right? And I think that there's a lot of challenges when you look at compliance, when you look at the bureaucracy and the infrastructure that's in place around particularly the U.S. military. And the challenge that we have is this creates an asymmetric situation, right? Where we're fighting other forces that don't have the same levels of bureaucracy that we have, and they don't have the same levels of compliance and policy that we have. They're able to move in some cases much quicker to deploy AI on the battlefield. And that becomes a competition situation where we need to be able to, in some ways, cut through those regulations in order to compete and to have solutions that can be that flexible and that intelligent all the way down to the battlefield. It's a conflict, though, because that's also in some ways terrifying, because you need to be able to have guardrails and controls around what these things do. You don't want to unleash a killing robot on the world, right, without some sort of parameters or some control over it. And being able to balance those two requirements where you have to stay competitive in the field, and then you also have to make sure that you're maintaining control as these things grow. It's very difficult to sort of walk that path between those two requirements.
See, there's some messaging, right, on all that, and I appreciate that. That's a really good snapshot, right? But I guess maybe I would I like the whole AI realism. No, I'm not necessarily a pessimist, right?
Yeah.
I see the benefits. I am an optimist. We have mitigated risk with things that Roy has brought to bear, solutions that incorporate augmenting a workforce, gaining efficiencies and effectiveness to make certain that that government entity is doing more, right. And doing it better. If you look at, in some cases, right, it depends who you ask, what the premise of AI is in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Right.
some people believe that's eradicating the workforce, right,
Yeah.
of humans. I think there was a quote I saw not long ago as a premise, productivity without the tax of human labor, right? What does that mean? If that's the premise, right, then they're already, and it's ungoverned and unregulated to a certain extent. I mean, then what does that mean? So I'm not trying to be a pessimist. I am an optimist. It's just there are certainly dangers and challenges, especially when it comes to mobiles. And
I'll maybe this will tie it together. So last year we did an exercise with the Maneuver Battle Lab. I think we talked about this offline. Force-on-force operation, 2 infantry companies. Right? Thunder. See, this is going to be an important topic. Force-on-force, 2 infantry companies at the Maneuver Battle Lab, armed with an enormous portfolio of drone capabilities, both UAS and whatever ground-based capabilities, both for ISR, kinetic strike, and resupply. All of these different drone-based capabilities. They created the drone operator at the squad level to integrate drone operations controlled at the squad level, and then they went at each other force on force. At the highest of levels, what ended up occurring was that neither the human infantry soldiers in either company actually engaged each other. The drones did all the fighting and eliminated the humans and each other on both sides over and over and over again. There were some observations made as well. The speed of operations was like nothing that anyone had ever seen before. The drone operator is an infantry squad member, right? So this is a person that maybe doesn't train on AI or on drone operations prior to joining the military. But because they have these mobile devices attached to their hands, they were doing these incredible things with no training. They would use the phone-based AI systems to integrate the multiple different drone feeds and decision tools, dashboards, to make decisions for them on the edge and then push those decisions back out to these plethora of devices. Again, no training. The tools enabled this, a mobile device on the edge, AI on the edge. And so instead of replacing the human, they augmented the human to give the human incredible capability.
So a good news story, right? But in that same vein, and we heard about the war games that were basically these digital brains were put to the test, right?
Oh, yeah.
95% of the time in the scenarios provided to AI, what did they choose?
Nuclear war.
Nuclear war.
We talked
right, and so without
my
that
son
human,
doesn't believe it. He watched war games.
Again, right? And it
Seems like such an obvious solution, I guess. If you're a computer.
I mean,
it would never happen.
Solves all the problems.
So yeah, it's its own logic. What do you believe? Again, there are good news stories, and I believe
I don't know if that's good or not.
That is not.
Thunderstruck.
This one with the squad and augmenting to make our forces, to make our folks on the ground more effective, more efficient, more lethal.
Yeah.
Without mitigating the risk, right, for rogues, right? That's a good news story, and that is again, right, what we are setting out to do, mitigating those rogue chances or those risks, and augmenting a workforce versus eradicating it. What do you believe?
Well, there's an enhancement I want to add to, because I didn't get to the AI part of that story. So all that digital communication that was going on, someone flagged it immediately, saying, "Hey, that's just commercial encryption. That's all this information's flowing over." And someone stepped in as a after-action review topic. Hey, we need to harden those communication links. And I just heard this last week at RSA that they're looking at putting Type 1 encryptors on all the drone communications. All right, great. They're acknowledging the problem, but Type 1 encryptors create a whole nother level of complexity they're not affordable, they're trackable, they're not disposable, all this.
You don't
Where the
fall
real
into
answer would
enemy
be like,
hands.
let's quantum enhance the links, right?
Yeah.
Let's quantum enhance the links using existing commercial techniques, hardened, right?
And again, we've been since August of 24.
Yeah.
Yeah.
August of 24, it's been the message. And here we are again, 2026, right before another soft week with the same message, and the same, better solutions with, with the things that you guys have going on. Obviously, Roy coming to STS and having those solutions with them. But again, not without mitigating risks, right? And when you look at, again, some of the metrics that are being taken, as you mentioned, they want to secure certain aspects of this mobile network, which is awesome. These digital brains, these algorithms, they are getting smarter each and every day. From what I'm gathering, and Roy, I think you and I spoke on it, right? They are now self-aware, right? They are modifying behaviors each and every time now that they're tested, and have even labeled humans as watchers. And so again, for an apparatus or a solution that again, it's going to cure diseases, it's going to provide you with solutions that took us 100 years to get to. I mean, there are so many benefits behind these tools and these this new technology, right, that's permeating. But without mitigating the risks and without regulatory guidance, there's a stronger potential for bad.
And I think, I think that's the challenge is walking this fine line, right, between challenging the existing guardrails, the existing compliance requirements that are there in order to let these AI solutions really fulfill their full optimal potential, right, the optimist view, while at the same time being able to field solutions that operate within those guidelines and still maintain compliance, still maintain your authority to operate, but can go into production and can help your workforce be more optimized, more efficient, more resilient, more responsive to threats or to emerging situations on the ground, right? There's a lot of ways that you can bring AI into the equation and into the organization, into the back office as well, that are following the regulations and making everybody more optimized and more efficient, more effective. And then there are ways that you can unleash that full power of AI from an optimistic perspective. And those are the ones that we have to really understand, right? What are the risk situations where we may just take the guardrails off and let them fly? As you said, in a battlefield situation, that may be what it requires in order to win the day. And it may balance out the other risks of those types of technologies. But we need to have those discussions. We need to have that framework in place so people know when to blow the doors off of it and when they need to operate within the lanes. And I don't feel like we have good frameworks for that yet, because this is all very new and it's emerging all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Something funny. I had Jack and Mike on the other podcast talking about, our transition challenges and relevancy and a lot of it obviously alluding to, that technical, that industry landscape change and things of that nature. If Jack were here right now, right, and let's just say all the stars aligned and everything was good, we established, or the government established that secure mobility is indeed an operational asset and should be treated like any other operational resource and tool and should be funded as such. And let's just say that the focus on providing a quantum secured infrastructure and regulating and leveraging AI to augment and make our forces more efficient and effective, all these things that sound great, everything starts to happen. Mm-hmm. How do you train a force that's been operating in the same construct or in the same, in the same wheelhouse, right? They have the same disciplines. We haven't seen technological advances like this ever. And I think that's what's scaring a lot of folks, is how do you train a force that's been embedded for the last 30, 40 years, in some cases, 10 or 15 for younger folks. But how do you train them holistically to understand the dynamics behind securing a mobile device in a hostile environment on the edge, leveraging an AI tool or an apparatus, right, to do better, to do good and not harm. What does it mean for that quantum, whether it's randomness, whether it's name the solution that you're providing to secure your infrastructure or architecture in the PQC world. How do you train people to do that? It's an entirely different language.
I tell you, the commercial world's using a baseball bat to do it, and they're coming in. I believe it was Meta that had an initiative a few months ago that said, look, if you're using AI in everything you do, you get a huge bonus, you get a promotion. And if you're using it a little bit, you keep your job. If you're not using it, you're gone.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting approach, because like this
It's more of a stick
squad,
than a
right?
carrot.
Like, anyone that's going to conduct military operations in the world today is going to use edge-based everything, right? Edge-based AI and drones, and the enabler of the drone is an edge-based device. The U.S. military is not ready for that right now, right? They would need to swing a bat. Take lessons learned from this exercise last year. I would doubt that anything significant has been done across the force based on feedback because it would be so radical to the way operations have been conducted today. And the classic American approach is always like the most expensive possible thing ever. I'll use an old example. Squad-based radios. The Marine Corps took a very efficient approach and fielded the entire Marine Corps with squad-based radios. They were about $50 to $75 or less per Marine. They were disposable. The United States Army recognized the same requirement, decided to go out and buy a multi-$1,000 radio that, while the requirement was for every member of the squad to carry, they could not afford to give it to everyone. And so very few active military infantry soldiers received this required communications capability. So the same thing's going to apply here, right? How are we going to step in and recognize the problem as a requirement and then make it efficient?
I think in some cases, right, when you look at software applications and things of that nature, it's a bit easier to scale than hardware devices and things of that nature, whether disposable or not. And I think that's a benefit. But the cost, right, the cost in that aspect may be challenging. Look, there's a lot to unpack here. There is so much information that you guys have hit on. We need to do this again to kind of unpack some of those things that those folks are reviewing are not only gathering absorbing the information, but they're being educated and understanding the dynamics between each of the solutions. And I think that's important. Mike, again, as normal, as usual, we've been together for a few years now.
Many.
Certainly appreciate you stopping by, having this conversation, giving us the updates on Privoro. We're so looking forward for years to come with that partnership and finally getting over that goal line on certain aspects, right?
Oh, yeah.
Roy, again, welcome aboard, right? Huge value added. Certainly excited with what's to come. As you come up with solutions on both the PQC and AI front, and hoping to augment our government brothers and sisters out there to make them more efficient and effective while mitigating risks.
Yeah.
And Eddie, again, obviously known each other for years and served together. Certainly appreciate you taking the time to sit with us. Your aspects and your optic, right? The perspectives you have sitting here in D.C. Are extremely valuable. I'd like to bring you back, talk a little bit more about what you're seeing and how the approach should or shouldn't be in some aspects with this technology as late breaking and as transformative as it has been. So are you going to Soft Week with us? Are you going to be there at Soft Week?
I plan on it. Yep.
All right. So for those folks out there, Joy 2115, is that what we're doing? Booth 2115, Michael Campbell and his crew from Privoro will be there. Come take a look at the latest and greatest innovation from the Privoro and Samsung team. That will certainly knock your socks off, right? It is an outstanding solution, and you guys need to see firsthand. So come talk to Mike. Come get your hands on those devices and take a look at how that can solve your mobility problems. Roy will obviously be there. Our CTO, he'll have his own CTO side, kind of with all his math and physics and all those weird things going on.
Fun things. Fun things.
Listen,
Yeah.
if you're that
Chessboard.
1,000-pound brain and you want to learn about AI and quantum, come by the booth. Come sit down with Roy. He'll even have a beer with you, right? And then knock your socks off, and while he's educating and making you smarter on all these things. Challenge here on this side, right? We've been together for 2 years, and I think I'm, not so smart, and so still trying to figure things out. But come by the booth for Soft Week. Again, Eddie will be there. This team will be there. Looking forward to the discussions. A whole lot happening out there in the industry today. A whole lot of things that still need to happen to get to those solutions. We believe we have all those solutions. We believe we have the right folks, the right teams, and the right partnerships to get after the problem sets out there that are being identified. So hit us up. Hit up Joy. Thanks again, Joy. Joy puts these things together for us and kind of just marshals it all together, makes sure that everything's on time and that we're exactly where we need to be. So thank you again, Joy. It's been great. It's been awesome. Looking forward to having more discussions. Looking forward to the next one. A lot more to unpack. And so until next time.